Lincoln was known as one of the best storytellers of his time. And what I found particularly fascinating were a couple of his own stories, his own experiences that led him to be the kind of person he was, to free the slaves and do all of these incredible things which we are now inspired by. So, let me share a little story of his own with you called the Reaper case. When Lincoln was a lawyer back before his presidency, he turned out to be a very amiable candidate for a big case that was argued by as patent infringement between McCormick and Manny. It involved a lot of lawyers, it was very expensive, and it determined whether one or the other would be the person who has all the power to create new Reapers. That's why it was called the Reaper case. So Lincoln toiled on it for months. He was allowed to do it, so he worked on it and worked on it and discovered different things about how it worked and what is necessary to prove his case. And then when he went to Cincinnati, where the case would be tried, it turned out that he was completely ignored. He was off the case. The person who organized all these things, called Edwin Stanton, fired him without even his knowledge. So Lincoln, undeterred, was very motivated to understand and try to help them. But despite this, Edwin continued to do incredibly mean stuff, like not even letting him to sit with the other lawyers, him eat with the other lawyers. He called him a huge ape, unfit for any intellectual labor. So all this, normally I would definitely be completely enraged at such a behavior, but Lincoln thought little of it, and when the case came around, he in fact pointed out how he really was inspired by the other lawyers' job, and especially Edwin Stanton's, and he said that he wanted to be more like him. So that's the first story. Now the second one is of his own. Once he became president, Lincoln was a very shrewd and utilitarian kind of president. And when one of his cabinet members turned out to be kind of treacherous because he wanted to be president himself, Lincoln was completely undeterred and told a very interesting anecdote of what led him not to fire that man. He said that when he was younger, he and his brothers would till the fields with a horse. And that horse would very often be lazy, but on one day, it would all of a sudden give this very energetic push forward, speeding up a lot of their work. And when he came to the end of the field, Lincoln saw that the horse had a chin fly on its face, which is what caused its pain and it caused its motivation. So what Lincoln pointed out is that since that man is doing such a good job, let him try to be president. Who cares? As long as he's getting his duties in, Lincoln is not really perturbed by it. So what I'm interested in is these two stories represent something about his behavior, but also about the idea of stories themselves. When we think about stories, we think of tales of different experiences by people, and that's basically what they are. It's experiences, but in Lincoln's case and in his case during the trial, it's more concrete than, say, a formula or an assertion of a belief is. Because when you see a story like his, you think, I know precisely that he's done that at this point, and perhaps maybe I could as well. So it's not only a mental model that it creates within us, but also a concrete sense of ability to do that. What value do stories bring us? That is kind of the question in reading different things, biographies, texts by different writers and authors. What is their purpose? Why do we do it? Well, it turns out that the big thing, the thing that really strikes me as important, is the ability to see the experiences and then acquire and model them for ourselves. Because fundamentally, our minds work by first gaining experiences and then extracting the patterns from them. So each book or each story we hear from someone is another example that allows us to modify our beliefs such to make them better. So by reading all these different stories, especially Lincoln's, which is very inspiring and vivid, we see that there are different ways of approaching the world, and they can in fact be more effective. So you can adjust your decision making, you can adjust your beliefs without really losing anything, because Lincoln eventually lost his life to the goal, but by reading his story, you don't have to. You can gain all the experiences he had without losing anything. So, what was my goal in reading Lincoln's biography? Well, because you can gain new experiences, new patterns of thinking by reading someone's story, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I chose the person who I thought was the most inspiring to do that. Because something called the mere exposure effect allows you to absorb the values, the understanding of another person, of another idea, by simply being exposed to it multiple times. A study a long time ago showed that after the idea of a designated driver was enforced in movies, people soon began to do it themselves. So when you saw someone not drink and then be the driver of the other drunkards in a movie, then you would do so yourself in your own life. So think about it this way. What if I saw and understood Lincoln's behavior and did so for a long time, explored him in various ideas and his various states? Naturally, that means you become a bit more like that yourself. You understand those ideas and absorb them. So the goal is eventually to act more ideally and to absorb these patterns of thinking and behaving that fit that model. So what do stories give us? Well, fundamentally, the ability to change and to do so in a way that we can understand. Rather than a formula or a set of numbers, we can see and feel something very vividly when you hear how Lincoln struggled through this trial, or he said some anecdote which was easy to visualize and understand. You can easily understand the lesson from it and apply it in your life. So that's fundamentally the goal, to change and to apply different changes you want to make. All right, so that's basically it. Now let me give you one more story. This one's a bit more entertaining for the end. In a debate with Lincoln and Stephen Douglas, who was his opponent for a long time, Lincoln was told he was a double-faced liar. And Lincoln, in response, said that if he really had two faces, he would not show this one. He had a very self-deprecating humor, and all the more is that a show of his selflessness sometimes. So, all right. So thanks for watching. See ya.